The story begins with a man named Takumi, as he's surrounded by a pack of wolves. He checks their stats, realizing they're rank C monsters, and they suddenly attack him, but he shoots them with his air bullets, taking them out instantly. He loots their corpses, as he recalls that he used to live an ordinary life in Japan, but one day, he suddenly found himself in a strange room, where a man begs for his forgiveness. He has no idea what's happening, so the man introduces himself as Sephiroth, saying he's a god, and he mentions that they're in the divine land. Takumi thinks he's about to get scammed, but Sephiroth denies this, as he reveals that he can read minds. He explains that he was trying to repair the space-time continuum, but he made a mistake, which accidentally killed Takumi. So to make amends, Sephiroth created a new body for him, and reincarnated him into the world of Ateldia. He realizes that his body is equipped with the knowledge he needs to survive, and he checks his stats, realizing he's at level 3. He suddenly hears something approaching, and he sees a boy and a girl, thinking they got lost. So he asks them about their parents, but they're afraid of him, and he hears their stomachs growling, so he thinks they must be hungry. He takes food from his inventory, telling them to eat it, so they taste it, and he realizes that their clothes are in terrible condition. He sees clothes in his inventory, so he makes them wear it, and he asks them if they want to join him, telling them about his plan to leave the forest. But they remain silent, so he decides to use his appraisal skill to learn about them, and he learns that they're both 5 years old, but they have no names. So he decides to name the boy Alan, and the girl Elena, telling them to follow him. As they venture through the forest, Takumi thinks about taking a break, because he doesn't want the kids to get tired. But they suddenly charge in, as a group of monsters appear. He's worried that the monsters might kill them, so he thinks about firing his air bullets, but he's afraid that he might hit them. But they wipe the floor with the monsters, and he can't believe this, realizing they're extremely powerful. He asks them if they sense the monsters approaching, and they confirm this, so he tells them to tell him before running ahead. They head deeper into the forest, and they encounter monsters along the way, but the kids deal with them, and Takumi tells them they're doing a great job. Later that day, Takumi realizes it's time for dinner, so they start a campfire, and they have a meal together, as he notes that the kids are happy, so he thinks they're warming up to him. The next day, they arrive in a city, and Takumi tells the guards that they passed through the forest of Gaia, but they find this difficult to believe, because only the best adventurers can survive in the forest. He tells them that he just gathered medicinal herbs, so he didn't go far, and the guards believe him. But they ask for his identity card, saying he needs it to enter the city, but he explains that he doesn't have one, because he's from a remote village. So the guards decide to screen him, and one of them tells him to hold a crystal ball. He obeys the instruction, knowing it searches for criminal records, so he wonders if the kids are going to be okay, because he doesn't know where they came from. The guard realizes they're all clear, so he gives them temporary identity cards, telling them to get an ID at the guild if they're planning to stay in the city. They look around the city, but Takumi realizes that the kids are afraid of strangers, and he heads to a chapel, where he starts praying to Sephiroth. So he appears before Takumi, asking him about his life in Ateldia, and he tells Sephiroth about the kids, saying he's planning to take them to an orphanage. But Sephiroth tells him not to do it, and he realizes that Sephiroth planned everything out, saying it was strange that the kids just randomly appeared in the forest. Sephiroth asks for his forgiveness, but he just wants to learn about the kids, and Sephiroth explains that he can't tell him everything. He knows that there are 5 gods in the world, and 4 of them represent the elements of nature, and their leader is the creator named Marianola. Sephiroth is the god of wind, and Takumi thinks he can't say anything because the other gods are involved, and he confirms this, saying the kids are special and it was dangerous to leave them in the forest. Takumi decides to take care of them, saying he was never planning on taking them to an orphanage, and he tells them they're going to find a place to stay. They spend the night in an inn, where the kids play on a bed, and they eventually fall asleep. The next day, Takumi wakes up, and the kids greet him as he realizes that they can now talk. So he becomes happy because they're making progress. They visit the Adventurers Guild, where they meet the receptionist named Luna, and Takumi tells her he wants to register with the kids. So she tells him to fill up the registration form, and she gives them their guild cards, saying it can be used as an ID. He realizes he's already at level 11, and she tells him about the guild, saying the newcomers begin at F rank, and they can climb all the way up to S rank. She mentions that there's also an SS rank, but there are no adventurers who have achieved that level, She explains that there's a party system for clearing quests, and the rank of the party depends on the average level of the members. To earn profit, the adventurers can accept quests from the guild, or sell the items dropped by monsters. Takumi wants to register a party, and she asks for his party's name, so he thinks about the kids, realizing they look like angels, so he decides to name their party as the White Wings. He checks out the quest board, and we learn that there are 3 types of quests. The hunting quest requires the adventurers to kill monsters, and the protection quest involves defending the objective. But he decides to pick a gathering quest, because they just need to collect herbs to complete the mission, thinking it's ideal for their first quest. He presents it to Luna, who gives them the mission, telling them they just need to gather 10 herbs of lily in 3 days. We see them searching around a forest, and they encounter a slime, but Takumi mentions that it's weak, so the kids play with it. He finds an herb of lily, and he shows it to the kids, teaching them how to gather it. They help him find more, so he tells them they're doing well, and they end up gathering a ridiculous amount. They return to the guild, and Luna can't believe they were able to gather that much, saying it's only been half a day, and she gives them their reward. But a man named Dominic suddenly appears, and he wonders what the kids are doing in the guild, so Takumi explains that he's their companion. But Dominic thinks they shouldn't be there, saying they should leave, and he threatens Takumi. So the kids attack him, but Takumi tells them to stop, asking Luna if they're going to get punished, but she explains that they acted in self-defense. The guard joins them, but he realizes that the fight is over, and the kids start crying, telling Takumi not to leave them, so he cheers them up, saying he'll never abandon them. The guard wonders what happened, introducing himself as Captain Vault, so Takumi tells him that Dominic started it, saying the kids cried because they thought he would abandon them. Vault thinks he's cruel, wondering why the kids would think he's going to leave them. So he explains that he doesn't know, but he mentions that he found them in the forest of Gaia, thinking they must have been abandoned. He wonders if carriages have been attacked around the forest, so Luna tells him about a slave trader group from the Algo Kingdom, which was attacked by monsters in the forest. Vault thinks the kids were dropped by the carriage to serve as decoys, and he praises Takumi for looking after them. But Luna asks him if he has materials from the forest of Gaia, so he tells her about the items dropped by the Red Wolves, and he sells it to her, as Vault explains that she's crazy about materials. He tells Takumi about the expedition, saying the soldiers head to the forest of Gaia to slaughter monsters, because they could threaten the city if their numbers aren't kept in check. But he explains that it's an A-rank forest, so he can only bring the best soldiers with him, and he invites Takumi to join them. But he refuses, saying he's still at rank F, but Vault reminds him that he was able to defeat Red Wolves, so this shouldn't be a problem for him. Vault talks to the guildmaster, telling him he wants Takumi to join the expedition, but the guildmaster can't believe he wants a newcomer to join them, so he explains that there's something special about him. A few days later, we see that Takumi has adjusted to life in Ateldia, and the kids are starting to interact with strangers. They've been sticking to a regular schedule, and they're enjoying their lives, but as Takumi eats bread, he realizes it isn't as good as the ones he's used to eating, so he decides to bake the breads from his world. They head to a bakery, where the shopkeeper Michelle asks him what he needs. But he reveals that he isn't interested in buying anything, and he just wants to ask a favor. So she introduces him to her father Rode, and he tells Rode to bake bread for him. He shows him the ingredients, telling him to put them inside the bread before baking it, and Rode reveals that he has never done this before, so Takumi decides to teach him how to do it. He demonstrates how to make the bread, as Rode realizes it's easier than he thought, and he tries making it himself, as Takumi tells him it's perfect. He tells Takumi to help him bake the bread, and he agrees to this, so they start baking, as the kids do their part, and after a few moments, the bread is finally ready to eat. Rode takes a bite, and he realizes it tastes amazing, thinking about selling it to his customers, so he offers to pay Takumi for coming up with the idea. But he explains that he doesn't need money, saying he just wants the bread to be available at the bakery, and he notes that he copied the idea from the bakers in his world, so he doesn't want to take credit. Rode thinks about experimenting with other fillings, and Takumi asks the kids about the bread, so they tell him it's delicious, saying they want more. The next day, Luna tells Takumi that he has been promoted to rank E, and he realizes he's already at level 13. She asks him if he wants to go to the labyrinth, telling him where he can find it, as she mentions that it has 15 floors, and the adventurers visit it to hunt monsters. He decides to check it out, and she tells him he won't be able to conquer it in one day. But he explains that he just wants to explore the first floor, reminding her he's just an E-rank adventurer, so he won't survive if he goes too far. But after some time, we see Takumi and the kids in the labyrinth, and we learn that they're already at the third floor. He notes that the kids are showing him the way, and this makes navigating the labyrinth easier, but he finds them mysterious, wondering how they know the right path. He realizes that the place is called the Earth Labyrinth, but a mole suddenly blocks their path, so the kids beat it up, but its body disappears, and they wonder why this happened. So Takumi reveals that monsters in labyrinths disappear when they're defeated, but they leave items in their place, and they realize that the mole dropped a whisker, but they all think it's useless. They head deeper into the labyrinth, and Takumi decides to call it a day, saying it's time for dinner, so he brings out his magical stove, using it to cook their meal, and they enjoy the food together as the kids have a great time before sleeping in their tent. They continue their journey, eliminating the monsters in their path, and after a few days, they reach the 10th floor, where they see a treasure chest. Takumi thinks it could contain a rare item, and the kids open it, realizing it contains 2 potions. One of them restores mana, while the other one replenishes stamina, but he knows they're just low-ranked items, so they aren't worth much. A monster suddenly appears, so the kids eliminate it, and it drops its skin, as he mentions that it's quite rare. He notes that the kids are amazing, because they're extremely effective when it comes to dealing with monsters, and he thinks they're gifted with superhuman instincts. So he's glad they weren't found by someone who could exploit them, thinking this is the reason why Sephiroth was worried about them. But a snake approaches them, and Takumi checks its stats, realizing it's venomous, so he tells the kids to stand back, thinking this is the perfect chance to try his throw skill. He hurls a rock with incredible force, and it blinds the snake as he uses his wind cutter skill, which slices it into pieces. But giant bees suddenly appear, and the kids struggle to hit them, so they use the throw skill, but the bees fly away, and he's surprised that they also have that skill. As they continue to pursue the monsters, he checks out his inventory, and he thinks about the slime jelly, wondering if it's actually useful. The kids finally defeat the monsters, and they drop honey, as he notes that it's rare, so he thinks hunting bees is a good idea. He prepares a meal, as the kids help him out, and he decides to use honey to enhance the flavor. They start eating together, thinking the food is delicious, but a group of bees suddenly approach them, so he uses his skills to eliminate them. But the kids see another group approaching, so they decide to help, and they're happy that they were able to gather more honey. They finally reach the 15th floor, where they see a giant door, thinking the final boss is waiting inside. They decide to check it out, but the door suddenly closes, as a giant worm appears. Takumi realizes it's the final boss, and they can't escape unless they defeat it. He tells the kids to let him handle it, and he uses his wind cutter, but the boss dodges it, and it starts attacking him with sand orbs. But he destroys them with his air bullets, and he fires his wind arrow, which is able to kill the boss. He can't believe he was able to defeat it so easily, thinking Sephiroth gave him overpowered skills, and he takes the loot, as the kids praise him for working hard. A door opens, and they see a teleportation device which can send them back to the top floor. They open a treasure chest, and they see fire bombs inside, as Takumi notes that it works like a grenade, but he sees the kids playing with it, so he takes them away, telling them it's dangerous. They use the teleportation device, and they're transported outside the labyrinth, but they see a strange wolf, as Takumi notes that it looks dangerous. But it starts wagging its tail, and he notes that the kids didn't attack it, so he thinks it must be friendly. He checks its stats, realizing it's an S-rank beast, and he's surprised that it has a contract with him, thinking Sephiroth is behind this. He tries issuing orders, and it obeys him, as the kids take a liking to it, saying it looks cute. They tell him he should name it, so he decides to call it Jewel, and the kids think it's a great name. They're about to return to the city, but Takumi knows that the villagers will panic if they see Jewel, so he hides it in his shadow, as he explains that he can summon it as needed. They head to the chapel, where Takumi asks Sephiroth if he sent Jewel, but he denies this, thinking the god of water was behind it. He decides to give him another contracted beast, telling him to go to the grassland outside town in the morning. But Takumi wonders why the god of water sent Jewel to him, and Sephiroth thinks he wanted to thank him. So Takumi believes it's because he's taking care of the kids, thinking they must be related to the god of water. He receives a gift from the gods, and Sephiroth tells him to accept it, but he hesitates, so Sifril warns him he's going to receive divine punishment if he refuses, so he ends up accepting it. The next day, they head to the grassland Sifril mentioned, and two creatures appear as they realize they have new companions.